Hello, and welcome to Age of Air, a podcast about astrology and magic. I'm your host, Rebecca Dean, and this is actually the very first episode I have ever recorded of Age of Air. And the reason really isn't just because I've been busy the last several years with other kinds of projects, but also because I'm really starting this project because we actually have embarked on a new elemental age of air. As of December 21st, 2020, the winter solstice, by coincidence, the planets Jupiter and Saturn have conjuncted or aligned in the sign of Aquarius on the ecliptic. This in itself is not that unusual. These two gas giants do align around every 20 years. The main difference is that these two planets have been meeting up in Earth signs for the past 200 and odd years, actually since 1802. And I don't want to go too much into detail about what that means because I wrote an article about that, which I'll mention at the end of this podcast. Since this is really the first episode, just give you a little bit of a background about who I am and why I'm starting this podcast at this time. So like I said, my name is Rebecca Dean. I'm originally from the California Bay Area, but I've lived in Berlin, Germany since 1999, so over 20 years now. And my main thing is that I'm really into is I'm a writer. I write short stories, and I'm also working on a novel at this time, and that's sort of my main ambition in life. I also have a day job that's sort of related to, like, around sort of copywriting and writing for education as well, so it's always kind of stayed within that very mercurial place of writing is a big part of my life. I also have been a passionate student of astrology for many years. I think I started, when did I first start? I guess in probably around the mid-90s, and just learned as much as I could on my own about astrology. And then finally did a 2-year course here in Berlin. There's a place called the Astrologiezentrum Berlin, sort of a school for astrology, which took a modern approach to astrology, so sort of 20th century astrology, which is very much tied to sort of depth psychology and the inner psyche. I think people who know astrology know this kind of astrology usually the most. So the idea is like, your Venus says something about your ideas around femininity and relationships, or those sorts of things, where it's really very much about sort of the internal workings of a person. At some point, I never lost interest in this sort of astrology, but at some point, I don't know, I got maybe a little bit bored, is maybe the right word for that. And for the past 2 years, I kind of have branched out more and have been learning more about traditional astrology, which is, what is the difference? I think in a lot of ways it's just much more predictive than modern astrology, and it goes beyond sort of just examining the inner psychological workings of a person. So what else? Yeah, I guess I should just let you know, what I started with even before astrology was actually tarot. I think I got my first deck of tarot cards at the Renaissance Fair when I was 15 years old. I was raised very Christian. It was sort of a weird hippie, Jesus freak, crystals are okay kind of Christianity. So in some ways, getting tarot cards wasn't sort of against my faith in a way that it might have been if I had been raised in a more conservative version of the faith. But it still freaked me out a little bit, and I think I threw that first deck into a nearby lake in sort of a fit of worried sort of righteousness, or worried about going to hell or something like that. I got over it, and maybe a couple years later, I started reading tarot cards, and I basically never stopped. I never really did as deep of a dive into tarot as I have astrology, but it's definitely still been a big part of my life. Sometimes I read more than other times, both for myself and others, but it's really never faded away. And as I develop this podcast and the newsletter for Age of Air, I really want to bring in a lot more tarot, explore the tarot more, bring in sort of ideas that other people have. And so that's definitely something that I aim to do. Yeah, around 2 years ago, something else happened, and that was I started getting into magic. I think it really was completely random. I was never particularly drawn to magic, or had some sort of experiences where, I don't know, to be honest, I thought magic was a bit cheesy. I do have to say I am kind of like a really earthy person. I mean, I have an Aquarius sun, but every other single goddamn planet in my chart is in an earth sign, basically, as is my ascendant. So I'm kind of a very skeptical person, even though these things pop up in my life. I'm not someone who just kind of charges into them. And so I think magic kind of stayed away from me for a while. But one day I just really literally thought, what would it be like to cast a spell? And I tried it, and it was kind of powerful. I had some sort of beginner's luck as well. And I haven't really looked back since then. I've sort of been exploring sort of what magic means for me, what I want to do with it, what kind of schools that I'm interested in. And I've really done a lot of exploring, from everything from sort of traditional witchcraft to a little bit of voodoo to chaos magic. And it's been a very interesting sort of experimentation phase. I think at this point, what I respond to the most actually is astrological magic, which fits very well with sort of my background already. And yeah, I'm going to talk a lot more about what that means, and sort of more about magic, and would love to also open up a community for people to talk about their magical practices and that sort of thing as well, in this podcast and newsletter. So anyways, that's just a little bit about me and my background. I like to babble too, as you can tell from this. So if you listen to my future episodes, that's what I'm going to be doing, is lots of babbling about these things that I'm incredibly passionate about. And what I really hope as a goal is just to find like-minded individuals, people who are also on fire about these things, want to talk about them, want to learn about them, bring in other viewpoints. Basically what I think this age of air is going to be great for, bringing in community, bringing in different voices. And that's what I hope that I can do with these new endeavors that I'm embarking on, Age of Air, the podcast and newsletter. Anyways, you can find me here. I'm going to be uploading new episodes. I'm hoping weekly, if not, then at least several times a month. Here at Age of Air, wherever podcasts can be found, wherever I happen to sort of put the RSS, or whatever it is. And as far as my newsletter goes, you can find that at ageofair.substack.com. So please check that out. I really plan to kind of interlink this podcast and that newsletter publication. It's also free of charge, so don't worry, I'm not trying to get some cash out of your hands. So you can just check it out of curiosity, if nothing else. And if you just want to know a little bit more about me and sort of what I'm doing otherwise, I actually have two websites. I normally publish my fiction under the name Rebecca von Schlieffen, which is my married name. But I also do have my website, RebeccaDean.com, and that's REBECCAH, and then Dean, like JamesDean.com. Don't forget the H. And there you can sort of see the other kind of writing I do, the other kind of things I do, the kind of crazy, wacky person that I am. And and I just hope that we have a chance to connect and talk about all these exciting things and explore the Age of Air together.